Forget the expert theories, the secret strategies, and the elaborate geopolitical chess game. None of it will help you understand Vladimir Putin. If you really want to understand what drives him, you need to look at what he fears, what fuels his rage, and the quirks he surrounds himself with behind closed doors. Once you do, the illusion of the mysterious mastermind falls apart. Let's break it down. My name is Elvira Barry, and I am an author who has been tracing Vladimir Putin's political journey for more than 2 decades. Here's what I've noticed. The fundamental mistake many experts make is judging Putin based on speeches written by professional speechwriters and eagerly accepting the information snippets fed to them by his intelligence and propaganda agencies. The result is an image of a mysterious, unfathomable dictator, something like the Night King from Game of Thrones. This image, combined with the vision of mad zombie soldiers endlessly pouring toward innocent civilians, instills fear and paralyzes the will to act. For some, it even sparks a desire to somehow negotiate with the Night King. Spare me and kill them! I'll do whatever you want, just don't hurt me. And that's exactly what Putin wants. To truly understand Vladimir Putin, you need to look at what he's building for himself, not just what he's creating for others. You need to listen to his thoughts when he's speaking off script, when he's upset, frustrated, outraged, or, on the flip side, pleased and inspired. But most importantly, you need to pay attention to what concerns him. Remember, our own personalities are shaped by what inspires us and what frightens us. So let's take a look at what inspires and frightens Vladimir Putin. In my personality classification known as the Sphinx method, Putin fits the personality type of the hunter player. The hunter is his core archetype. Above all, people like this crave victories and prizes, and without them, their lives lack meaning. The leading aspiration of the hunter player is elation, the anticipation of a win, and the happiness that comes with victory. He is highly emotional, but tries to conceal it, just like a gambler sitting at a poker table in Las Vegas. Emotions are what govern his life. He is incredibly brave, but only when his physical safety is not at stake. He is willing and eager to risk money and other resources. The higher the stakes, the more exciting it is. The player is constantly swept up in the game, and he often ends up doing things he later regrets. He is not a strategist, but a tactician. However, he possesses a sixth sense that allows him to see opportunities where others see nothing. The player has the unique ability to navigate between raindrops, and is always using this gift to his advantage. For Putin, the most important thing in life is the game. The ultimate thrill for him is to outplay others, grab the prize, and emerge as the dark horse who crosses the finish line first. Unlike others, he plays for the win, not for the process itself. If he does not see a prize at the end, he simply loses interest. For Putin, Ukraine is the prize. Why does he want it? That's irrelevant. He doesn't know what he will do with it, and he has no plans for it. The key is to wrest it from the West in general, and from Zelensky in particular. The player has an extremely high opinion of himself and his intellectual abilities. If something goes wrong, he is more likely to blame others than himself. Listen to Putin in interviews. Whenever problems arise, he endlessly repeats that he's been set up, deceived, or taken advantage of. Losing to Zelensky is unimaginable for him, just as he could not accept the loss of Chechnya during the Chechen War. It would have been more beneficial for Russia to let it go rather than spend billions bribing Chechen leaders. But it's not about benefit. It's about the win and his self-image. If the player is fighting for something and in his mind sees himself as superior to his opponent, he cannot give up the prize. even if it brings him only losses. Swagger and showing off are two main pillars for the player. Everything must be top tier, better and more expensive than what others have. For the player, it's crucial to be among the elite. Being accepted at the highest levels gives him that ecstasy of victory. He wants to be admired and feared. The fact that Putin is no longer accepted in respectable circles is deeply offensive to him. Imagine the feelings of a seasoned gambler who's being denied entry to the best casino in town. That's it. Now you understand how Vladimir Putin feels. At his core, the player is a trickster. He's not the Night King. He's more like Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. The player thrives on schemes, cheat codes, and even outright cheating. He's aggressive, but only when he knows no one can retaliate. There is a children's rhyme by Grigory Oster that perfectly captures the player's approach to aggression. The best way to tease is from the top of the roof, or from a tank where you're bulletproof. But if you would like them completely destroyed, a radio broadcast is your ultimate toy. This is a perfect reflection of how the player operates. Now, it's easy to see why the theme of nuclear blackmail is constantly floating around in Russia's media space, right? Most players have a natural charm. If they want, they can talk nearly anyone into anything. This happens because their inner emotional energy gets transmitted into their speech and behavior. They operate on high energy, and people get addicted to it like a drug, especially those who struggle with their own emotions. This is why such characters are constant heroes in fairy tales, films, and books. They are fun to watch. Think of figures from folklore like Loki, Robin Hood, Anansi the Spider, or Puck from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Most players are inclined toward mysticism, especially the successful ones. Only a special relationship with higher power can explain the nature of their success. That's why Putin is surrounded by a whole army of priests, fortune tellers, astrologers, and the like. Normally, a player is not cruel. He is simply indifferent to the suffering of others. He does not think about it. He does not wish harm on anyone, and he much prefers to be loved than hated. This is exactly why Russia is at war. But there is no death penalty. There's no mass terror either. Other people do the killing far from Putin, and they're killing insignificant people, those whom Putin believes would have led meaningless, pointless lives anyway. In this way, the dead at least serve some purpose for Russia. Yes, Putin completely identifies with Russia and genuinely believes that what is good for him is good for his country. How else could it be? After all, for some reason, God made him president. This means he's on a special mission, and he absolutely must fulfill it. People of this type can't and don't want to engage with the themes of suffering and death. They fear illness, physical weakness, and aging. Player is terrified of becoming a laughingstock, an old clown who's no longer of interest to anyone. That's why Putin constantly undergoes rejuvenation procedures and is practically obsessed with his health and longevity. He doesn't even look like himself anymore due to endless injections and facelifts. In Russia, he is often referred to as the Botox grandpa. The player is also extremely concerned with his safety. He fears pain and violence, but only when it comes to himself and his loved ones. If he suspects someone wants to harm him, he becomes borderline paranoid. That's why Putin meets guests across long tables, keeping a physical distance. That's why meetings are held with guests quarantined for weeks before seeing him, to prevent any possibility of infection. That's why he appears in public either alone or surrounded by the Federal Protection Service, who, when necessary, dress as fishermen, workers, or widows of soldiers killed in war. Public debates, or even casual encounters with random people who might evoke negative emotions in Putin, are entirely off the table. The player doesn't like playing by the rules. Deep down, he believes that any problem can be solved in a more clever way. And the rules are just for those who can't think for themselves. The player loves finding unconventional solutions, and he particularly enjoys when they have a theatrical flair, especially if they include jokes that only the insiders understand. Humor is a big part of the player's world, but it really depends on his cultural level. For instance, the incident with Alexei Navalny's poisoned underwear, it's a classic example of an inside joke for the elite. Putin, in particular, finds anything related to toilets or intimate matters amusing, and that humor frequently comes through in his speeches. Lying for the player is not just deception, it's a form of theatrical art. The sheer ability to outwit someone and pull the wool over their eyes with cleverness and performance is what captivates him. Empathy is not a strong suit for the player, but self-interest and vanity are. The moral side of things doesn't concern the player much. This is why he isn't particularly bothered by corruption, either his own or that of those around him. Putin doesn't have a clear ideological foundation and he's changed his beliefs numerous times. Yesterday, he believed that Russia's best option was an alliance with NATO, but today he sees it as the worst. Yesterday, he wanted to build capitalism. Today, the state is taking everything under its control. Yesterday, he promised he would never attack Ukraine. And today, he's burning Russia's national wealth to win a game and claim a trophy, Ukraine's head, which he can preserve and display on his shelf. The reason is simple. The player can easily align his beliefs with his immediate personal needs. And his personal need is to experience the euphoria of victory. The player loves scale, grandeur, and spectacle. He enjoys celebrations and large events, but only if he is either the star of the show or one of the honored guests. Being just another dancer in the crowd is completely unacceptable to him. He's drawn to anything that stirs up his emotions. Anyone interested in understanding a person's inner world should take a look at how they set up their living space. At Putin's palace in Gelendzhik, you'll find a full array of luxuries: a spa, sports facilities, gyms, swimming pools, an aqua disco, a wine cellar, a home theater, a musical living room, a theater, a casino, slot machines, and a hookah room. A special dark room with no windows that closely resembles a strip club. This is how Jack Sparrow's paradise would look. When the player feels like a winner, he generously hands out money, but only to his own, either family or friends. He enjoys luxury, large purchases, and high-status items that show how much he's achieved. That's why Putin's residents are overwhelmed with gold. The most expensive furniture, the most famous architects, the rarest materials. By the way, do you know why it all looks so outdated? Because Soviet children's ideas of wealth were shaped by films made in Russian imperial palaces. Children in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, were taking on tours of those places. Soviet people also watched 1960s French historical melodramas at the cinema, which were filmed in old palaces and chateaux. Putin is simply unfamiliar with modern design. By the way, I have a separate video on the money culture of the Soviet Union. Check it out. It explains a lot. Despite his love for showmanship, the player does not enjoy publicity. He keeps outsiders out of his personal life and prefers to be admired from a distance. He has one persona for the outside world and a completely different one for personal relationships. And how he views himself is even more private. We don't know exactly how. He won't tell us. However, I have many interviews with people of this type, and each of them has this third self. People of this type often face challenges in their personal lives unless they are fully self-aware and have control over their virtues and flaws. The player often sees his chosen partner as a prize to be won. This prize has to be prestigious and stir emotions in him. If it doesn't, he loses interest. In his youth, the player loves to flirt. He's very good at it. However, building long-term, trusting relationships is difficult for him. If things aren't going well in his personal life, he feels ashamed of it. That's why any intrusion into his personal life is extremely painful for the player. For instance, in 2008, the newspaper Moscow Correspondent published an article about Putin leaving his 50-year-old wife and planning to marry 24-year-old gymnast Alina Kabaeva. The newspaper was shut down, and its editor-in-chief Grigory Nikhoroshev was forced to emigrate. The player wants to give his loved ones the very best. If the means are available, he showers them with gifts. It doesn't matter whether we are talking about an ex-lover or a distant relative. Deep down, the player longs for a close-knit family. By nature, he is a lone wolf and doesn't really need the presence of others, but he craves admiration and gratitude from those closest to him. The player is an excellent negotiator, deal-maker, master of ceremonies, and intermediary. He can strike deals with anyone, arrange everything, earn commission, and feel satisfied because his schemes are working. This is how Vladimir Putin's career began when he worked in the KGB, closely collaborating with the Stasi. Manipulations, the ability to elevate some people and ruin others, along with a sense of superiority over others, clearly steered the soul of young Putin. The romance of intelligence work and the privileged position of a Soviet officer abroad. Oh, this was an incredible career leap for a boy growing up in post-war Leningrad. After the collapse of the USSR, Putin became a fixer in the St. Petersburg city administration, handling foreign relations. This was a time when major cities were almost starving. Russia was receiving humanitarian aid from the West, and raw materials were exchanged for food. Putin was the one who oversaw these streams. And whoever had control over the distribution of these goods had the chance to make huge sums of money, and with money came enormous influence. This must have felt like incredible luck, one jackpot after another. Putin raised the stakes, took risks, set unimaginable goals for himself, and every time he succeeded. And that sheer thrill was intoxicating. When Putin became president, he continued doing what he always did, negotiating, striking deals, and deciding who would get what. This is when he truly tasted the power. Inherited from the Soviet Union, he didn't just get oil and gas. He also inherited the Soviet state apparatus, including the repressive machinery. This was an interesting toy. Pull one lever and whoosh, your enemy is destroyed. Press a button and everything you wished for is brought to you. He could make any wish, even the most outrageous, and it would come true. Putin found himself in a casino where every slot machine paid out. In 2022, the wish machine malfunctioned. Putin asked it to give him Ukraine, with its people eager to join his domain, but instead it delivered a long, brutal war he never anticipated. Annoyed by the mistake, he tried to fix it, feeding the machine more and more money. It made strange noises, shook and smoked, but Putin is not one to give up. He still craves his prize, and if the machine can deliver, then too bad for it. Power is as important to the player as it is to other ambitious personality types, such as the commander. However, the commander wants to be the father or mother to their subordinates. For the commander, power is the ability to lead people toward a specific goal, and they have a clear vision of what the goal looks like. Catherine the Great and Joseph Stalin were examples of this type. For another personality type, the champion, power is a means of self-actualization. The champion wants to unlock their potential and achieve what others cannot. Want to see what this looks like in practice? Look at the biography of Leon Trotsky. For the warrior type, power is a badge of merit. If people listen to you and recognize your will, then you are doing well and deserve your place. Peter the Great was like this. He spent his life proving that he was as capable as any other monarch in Europe, and ultimately, he succeeded. The ruler type is only interested in power in the context of controlling minds. They create ideologies and try to convince others that they are right. They don't want to manage, they want to guide. Lenin was an example of this type. Commanders, champions, warriors, and rulers often take the top positions because they have all the prerequisites for leadership. But players rarely rise to the top of the social pyramid because they tend to suffer defeat long before they have access to real power. The only player I can think of in Russian history is Ivan the Terrible. But Ivan inherited his power while Putin won his through chance, like a roulette game. Putin is unique, and he knows it. He's continuously raised the stakes and kept winning even though he wasn't supposed to. Power is not ideal for this type. Imagine if Jack Sparrow were the head of state. It's not hard to predict the future of such a country. If it had resources, Jack would host grand celebrations, build himself the biggest palace, dress all his pirate mates in silk pants, and surround himself with a legion of lovers. He'd first collect money from everyone and then spend it on some boat races. Then he'd come up with some new game, as long as there's excitement and thrill. Now, imagine Jack Sparrow has grown older and grown tired of it all. The old games no longer amuse him. There is no more thrill. The other players mock him, they don't like him, and they don't invite him over. His cronies just want to grab what they can. No creativity, no imagination. He's craving excitement. Putin has explicitly mentioned this during interviews. So Jack starts talking to God and to the great statesmen of the past. He plays on their field, making huge bets, stirring up his blood, eagerly watching where the ball of history will roll this time. What is Putin counting on? He believes that he can outlast all his enemies. He does not need to be re-elected. His subordinates will create any ratings and election results he wants. He doesn't believe his resources will ever run out because he doesn't understand economics and because God is on his side, right? After all, he's been given control over this vast territory called Russia that must mean something. The plan is roughly as follows. If he could not break Ukraine with direct force, it's no big deal. Putin will make the West start negotiations with him, and thus he'll be back in the game, sitting at the table with world leaders. Ukraine's economy will be shattered, Europe will be overwhelmed with problems, and the United States will no longer want to fund the global security system of its own. Putin will find a small but vocal party in Ukraine, give them money, and make sure they win the next elections, steering the country back toward Russia. And that will be genius, right? Ukrainians have lost so many lives, endured so much hardship, and for what? In the end, it will all go the way the most brilliant player in the world decides. If you tell Putin that Ukrainians will never forgive Russia for the suffering it's caused, he will just smile. After all, Georgia forgave Russia. There was a war there too, and it didn't go well for Putin at first. But then he bought the right politicians and did things his way. He's absolutely convinced that he will outplay everyone again. This could be fought by the defeat of Putin's army on the battlefield. Ukraine's problem is that it doesn't have enough soldiers or weapons to withstand the pressure of a force that, while thoroughly corrupt, is still a massive army. Something similar happened in Russian history 100 years ago. The White Army fought against the Bolsheviks and lost the war because they were vastly outnumbered and their supplies were controlled by the Western countries, who eventually said they were no longer interested. As a result, Bolshevism took root in Russia and, a few decades later, forced the West to spend astronomical amounts of money on their Cold War. But those were the problems of later generations. If you want to know how it happened, read my novel Russian Treasures. The link is in the description. Another possible scenario could be that China and India suddenly stop buying Russian oil at favorable prices, which would immediately trigger a crisis in the Russian economy. Putin's allies would rush to him begging, "Don't ruin us! If we keep spending all our money on this war, we'll go bankrupt. There will be a revolution and we'll all be hanged on the lampposts." This would be a shock to Putin. How could this happen? Stop playing? Are you crazy? He would feel betrayed, robbed, and would begin to hate those who pulled him away from the game when the victory was so close. If he is stripped of his sense of purpose, his tribe, he will either deflate quickly or react like Ivan the Terrible did when he realized that none of his grand projects were working. The player will shift the blame onto others and take a revenge on those he deems responsible. Soon, he'll get caught up in this new exciting game, and here at this point, his cunning and ruthless cruelty will emerge as he feeds on the defeat of his perceived traitors. His wrath will be directed at his closest circle. After all, it's because of them that the war, which was supposed to last just a few weeks, has dragged on for years. He gave them everything, positions, authority, and vast sums of money, and they squandered it all. And now they dare to suggest that he, the chosen one, could be hanged on a lamppost. He will seek new support and will find it among the soldiers who return from the front. These soldiers will realize that no one cares about them. Angry at the commanders who sent them on futile assaults and the officials who lied to and stole from them, they will eagerly support the Tsar's campaign against the aristocracy. Additionally, Putin will receive support from patriotically minded students and high schoolers who are already being ideologically manipulated. These children were born under Putin and cannot imagine any other leader in his place. They will be enraged by the inability to conquer Ukraine, and their minds will be filled with the ideas I discussed in my video about Russian propaganda. They will be thrilled by the idea of bringing down corrupt officials. After all, the economy will collapse and someone must be held accountable. These children are already enthusiastically reporting their teachers and classmates who do not support their great president. They believe this is an act of patriotism. They are poorly educated because during Putin's reign, Russian universities suffered significantly and many of the best professors left. These children don't know who the Red Guards were or what they did during Mao's time. They've never heard of China's Cultural Revolution, and they have no idea where it led. Putin may have heard of it, but it won't stop him. He's not a strategist, he's a tactician. He solves problems the way they are solved here and now. And what happens later? He doesn't care because he would not see the outcome anyway. After all, he is already 72. If you want to find out what your personality type is, take the quiz on my website. The link is in the description. That's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.